Hello, everybody. I'm Susan Wolfe, and I'm community consultant from Cedar Hill, Texas in the US. And I want to talk about encountering and confronting colonizers, one community psychology practitioner's experience. Okay, first I'll start by describing a little bit about the project that we were working on. My team was contracted to serve as the evaluation team for a project funded by a foundation to support 5 rural counties in Texas. The goal being that they would develop inclusive coalitions, which meant that underneath it all, that everybody in the county would have an opportunity to participate if they desired, to develop community level strategies that would support resilience, mental health, and well-being. Oops. Okay, so to do this evaluation, we decided that we would use community coalition action theory as our framework. And because we needed to record and sort of monitor and evaluate the formation of these coalitions, and then later work on evaluation with them for their initiatives. So this theory was good because it has all the components that we needed to watch for, the processes, and it includes sort of a longitudinal view from formation through institutionalization. Plus, because this was about justice, systems level change, and inclusion, we decided to also incorporate a principle focused approach using the collaborative principles for equity and justice that are shown on this slide. They include addressing social and economic injustice and structural racism, using a community development approach where residents have equal power, using community organizing as an intentional strategy to build resident leadership, focusing on policy systems and structural change, building on scholarship research and acknowledging the complexity of coalitions and communities and evaluating work, and then developing collaborative core functions that are based on equity and justice, build member ownership, and leadership. So from the very beginning, we decided to begin with a baseline assessment. We needed to create a good description of what is going on in each of these 5 counties. You know, what are they working with? What are some of the issues that they're confronted with? What do we need to pay attention to? And then where are they at in terms of these development of their coalitions? Do they have anything started? We weren't allowed to come in until a couple of months after the project began. And this is where some of the trouble was already beginning, because we weren't allowed to schedule visits ourselves. And we had to, every time we visited a community, we had to have the intervention team and the foundation staff with us. And so we were already concerned about not having the autonomy needed to serve as a third-party evaluator and go into the community. And then they were, well, we don't really want you to come in until we've been working for a couple of months. And we kept explaining that for the baseline, we really needed to get in first thing. So we found the foundation staff were intrusive and they were engaging in inappropriate behaviors at things like going in and telling them, everybody, oh, by the time this is over, you'll invite us to all your weddings and we're going to be the best of friends. And we're like, oh no, because, you know, it's like, this is not about friendship. This is about us coming in and supporting. And of course, we hope we develop a good relationship, but at the same time, the foundation's approach was a little bit beyond professional at times. So we weren't able to set up our own interviews and we couldn't explore independently. And as I said, the foundation staff intruded, including even demanding that their learning officer be allowed to sit in on some of our interviews, which of course then created sort of a boundary. Because remember, the foundation had the money, they held the power, which the minute they walk in the room, they already have an effect on the dynamics whereby the people in the community are more focused on impressing them because they want to get more money in the future, and not as open and honest as we had hoped they could be. But throughout this, we were still able to uncover colonizing behaviors that were very clear in 2 of the 5 communities. The first one was colonization from within. Basically, it was a community that had a history of racism very serious, right down to being a sort of a central place for the Ku Klux Klan, and they had huge problems with that. The coalition coordinator decided she would develop a bunch of coalitions that could network with each other. So she developed one for veterans to address veteran concerns, one for faith-based organizations to come together to work on faith-based issues, an early learning coalition for organizations that wanted to come together and address some of the early learning concerns, and then a youth coalition where youth could come together. And then with the money from the foundation, she was going to use that to develop a resilience coalition. And this was where she wanted to bring the Black community together to focus on wellness activities among themselves, which, number one, was not anywhere near addressing structural issues or the racism or the other issues in the county that were contributing to, or I should say, taking away from health and wellness. But also it was further segregation. It basically, the whole structure, as you can see, there's segregation of the coalitions. We called that out, and the foundation was not excited about confronting it. They wanted to sort of dance around it. They just really didn't want to deal with it. So community number 2 is exploitation and colonization by an outside helper. This was a very impoverished community. It was once thriving, but now faring poorly since 2015, when they lost their last major source of revenue and the community was going into decline. The community was 95% Hispanic, 66% non-English speaking at home, and 35% below poverty level. There was a professor from the university that was located 80 miles away that decided that he would come in and write the grant and work with a local organization to bring this coalition together. This university professor was not from this community, and he was a white male, and he had not really been spending time with this community prior to this. So what was the problem with this? It sounds great. Oh my God, he came in and he's going to help. Well, first of all, he said he would do their needs assessment. We uncovered serious issues with his methodology. He was not going to uncover needs, but he was really using it to do one-on-one interviews with community members as a means of deciding who he would invite that he would deem appropriate to be part of this community coalition. So here was a white man from the outside coming into a poor, predominantly Hispanic community to decide who should belong to the coalition. He was conducting surveys on hope and resilience. This is an individual level measure, totally unrelated to the structural change that was needed. However, it was what his line of research was. He was, I believe, an associate professor, and he had a history of publishing research on hope and resilience. He decided that the first project and focus of this coalition should be a community art project, painting a mural. The mural he was planning was culturally inappropriate. We checked with 2 outside experts who said, no. One said basically, no, you can't do this. Oh my gosh, it's so offensive. And the other one said, it's like someone from the outside trying to come in and tell the Mexican culture about itself. And I just don't understand that. I don't understand this. So we called out and said, we told them basically they're heading in the wrong direction. And this isn't in the spirit of what a community coalition that is empowered and inclusive would be able to do. He was outsider calling the shots, developing the direction, but he was also working with the coalition to seek funds for his project. He had set the agenda, and the community in the meantime was saying, we need jobs, we need, money, we need health care. But he decided that they needed a mural. So we pointed it out that it was in violation of the principles. Let's go back to them. It wasn't addressing social and economic injustice. It wasn't a community development approach. The residents didn't decide on the project, he did. The community organizing as an intentional strategy to build resident leadership. He was assuming leadership. He was saying that the agency was leading it and making it look that way. But behind the scenes, the agency leaders admitted that they just didn't know what to do without him there telling them. So he wasn't doing anything to build their leadership, wasn't focused on any kind of structural change. He wasn't building on scholarship and research, except for his own, of course. He was building his own research and exploiting the community to do it. And then the collaborative core functions were not being developed, and they certainly weren't based in equity and justice. He wasn't building member ownership, and he wasn't building their leadership. We called this out and warned the foundation that this was a problem and suggested that they needed to address it. And when we did, one of the foundation officers went to him, told him what we said, and he was a young, handsome male, and she was a young female. And he also had a very charismatic personality, so to speak. And she came back and told, I don't know what she said, but they said basically that we were not allowed to go back to that community, that he was doing things. And we said, no, we're done here. We basically ended up just resigning. Because the demand was that we would go and apologize to him for what we had suggested about his work. And we were like, no, we're not going to apologize for that. We're right. He's exploiting the community for his own good. And so that's what can happen when you do call out colonization practices to funders. They either may not want to deal with it as in the first community, or B, may decide that they want to collaborate with the colonizer. Remember, this was a university professor, and we were community consultants, and there is a bit of a pecking order there that has to be recognized. So we walked away from the project. I'm not sure whatever happened with it. I'm not sure what, because we didn't even follow up. We were done. So anyways, that is our story about what happened when we addressed colonizing practices. I think it's important that you bring them out and that you base them in something. Like I said, we based them in the principles. We were able to show how they did not fit with the principles that had been agreed on ahead of time as the framework. And we feel good that we did the right thing, even though it meant that we sacrificed, the project, but that may happen. So that is it. If you have questions about this, if you want to talk about it, it's really hard to do this via Zoom and recordings and stuff. I would have loved to have discussed this and been there in person to talk about it, but I hope everybody's faring well, and please feel free to email me if you want to talk about it or email about it. I'll be happy to engage. Thank you for listening.